Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Pedophile Huntress. We're here with a common goal that you be encouraged in heart and united in love with us. On my last episode, this is going to be a different one. I'm going to tell my own story. It was interesting. She said to me, Jody, have you ever shared your story? So I think I will share my story this time. I'm going to start with the question that I asked them. What is my motivation to be the pedophile huntress? I'll tell you, I believe that I am a protector and defender of God's people. I also believe that I'm acting under divine guidance to bring justice and victory. I know that I can help break generational curses and bring godly healing, purpose, and destiny to you. So that's why I'm here. I always ask people then to bring us into their story with what they're comfortable with. And it was interesting. I never have done this, so I'm going to start at the beginning. I was raised in a family of four children. I was the youngest of those four. In the 60s, we lived in this dinky little house, and that's where all the mayhem started. Um, oh, it's hard to retell our stories, but I'll tell you, I want to start with first sitting from a place of victory. So the where I want to go is how and what I've overcome because I've overcome a lot. And I feel like in that place of victory is where I now live from. And so overcoming these tragedies in the past have taken me dedicated time, dedicated purpose to get better. It is not hard. It is not easy to step into the arena with your pain and say, I'm going to wrestle you to the ground until you go. And that's what Jesus and I did. So let's see, 1964, I was born in July. I have two sisters and a brother. We lived in a dinky little house that had three bedrooms, small bedrooms, and one bathroom. There was a play yard in the back. There was a trailer back there. I remember the trailer because my brother and I were abused in that trailer with my dad's friend. My dad's friend and my father are both dead now. To be honest, it's easier when your perpetrators who've been so cruel to you aren't on this planet anymore. But they were the leaders of the pack in those days. My mom joined in with them. She did nothing to protect, but it was the trio against all the children in the house. I don't ever tell my siblings stories, so I keep my stories to myself. Um, that time, I just remember my brother being with me in the trailer as I was going over kind of that house. But that house was very small, and my mother worked perpetually in those days, but my father seemed to be around a lot. And he drank beer from the time he got up until the time he went to bed. Sometimes, his legs betrayed him, but it seemed like all of his man parts always worked because honestly, in those early years, I turned four when I moved out of that house. The only thing I really remember a lot, well, I remember my trike. I remember the ice cream man coming, and I remember being raped by my father. I know that I had to do some things with my mother. I don't remember doing anything with Craig. It was like dad had him do things with the older kids when I was there. So, anyway, that was the beginning of my life in that house. I have written a book called A Prisoner by No Crime of My Own. In that book, I talk about witnessing a murder when I was in that house. So, Dad used to leave a lot in those days, kind of come home sporadically in the middle of the night because I don't know if he just lost his keys or whatever, but I remember him doing that. And so this was just another night, the night of the tragedy. He had stayed out all night and mom had come home. I was told this by my uncle later, why I may have been with my father this day. So you can read all of the articulated facts in my book, A Prisoner by No Crime of My Own, but I will try to recount it here. So anyway, father came home in the morning, and he and mom were in a fight. Mom was desperately in love with my father, did anything. I always say they were kind of like Bonnie and Clyde together. And so when he came home, he was obviously in a lot of trouble. And I had to go with my dad, or I don't really remember that conversation, but I ended up going with my father to this hotel room. And in this hotel room, again, I'm not going to go into the deep details, but we walked. Actually, I met the lady outside. My grandmother, I learned later, worked at this hotel. Um, and so that's probably why we were there because my grandma wasn't there, but Craig and this lady were there when Dad and I got there. And he put me in the room. A little bit later, they came in. They were partying. I had a lot of parties at the house I was raised in, so I knew what partying was. Even at 3, that was my life. And so I just thought they're all going to party and everything was okay. But then my father ended up raping this lady. This lady flipped out. I remember her scooching up on the bed and freaking out. And at that point, my father, Craig, kind of got her off the bed and held her down. And my father had a knife always with him, and he slit her throat and ended her life. Um, I could tell you the details of that room. That was not good. It took me years to get those memories back. But oddly, the only dream that I had that was a reoccurring dream over and over in my life was this murder. The rapes and all of that, they just lasted for so long, and I'll go into that in a minute, that they were just kind of in the recesses of my mind. But this murder stayed with me. I had this reoccurring dream all of my life about my father being in my room, and I would be sitting downstairs looking up and watching him rape this lady, and then my dream would end. So it was one of those tragedies that I obviously couldn't work out. So after they killed her, they put her in the bathtub, cleaned up the room somewhat. I know that in the bathtub, they ran the water over her neck to get the blood off because my father, made me do certain things in the room, like hold the knife. I think that was all accountability, making me feel as guilty as he was, which lasted probably most of my life. But I can say that I'm free from that now. Anyway, then they wrapped her up in the bedspread, put her in the back of this car. I can remember being so little that I could barely get into the back of the car. And of course, knowing that she'd gone in the trunk, I was terrified. I was 3. In a few months, well, no, the month after I'll turn 4. So I'm almost 4 because this murder happened in June of 1968. Anyway, so we go up to my parents' property where they were building a home. We all didn't live there yet, but I knew that was our property. It was 40 acres, significantly a distance from the city, probably 40 miles, I think, or 20 miles. It was a long ways. We stayed there all day. We came home. I can remember Dad cleaning out the back of Grandma's car in front of her house. I can remember in my 30s when the memories came back, I went to her house and saw the spigot. And just, everything that I remembered was always in the right place. And so it was very reasonable to believe that these things had happened. In my 30s, when it came back, I obviously went to my parents and confronted them. And my mom said that a significant event did happen at that time and that my father ended up in the hospital for a week. So I actually, long, long process, but I got this piece of paper that my father signed, and I don't think he thought I'd get the records. But as these stories go, it's quite significant. It took a year for him to sign it. I walked into the hospital with that signed release, and this lady handed me this envelope and held on to it. And she said, I don't know what you need these for, but I hope that it gives you your answers because these were in a box to be destroyed tomorrow. Now, those records were from 1968, and this was 2004. So, I mean, there's been some miracles along the way in my life where I really believe that Jesus has helped me overcome. And I got that date. Um, but let's go back to the story. So let's see, 1968, I then have to go back to the house. My dad goes in the hospital. My mother is incredibly unkind, as she always was. I remember her asking me questions that night. And because I didn't have the answers, I do remember her hitting me in the head and just, basically telling me go to sleep. And she left the room. We moved out of that house and into the big house where this woman's body was buried and is still buried to this day. When I was 4, we moved into the big house. I had to stay in that house with the lady down the hill my entire life with that lovely dream. But one of the things people ask me about is I talk about the murder more than I talk about the abuse. So I'm going to talk about the abuse in that house. I don't have a lot of memory from like 4 to 8. I don't know if that's because my father stopped raping me for some time because of his guilt over killing this woman. I don't really know. I don't know if he continued the rapes and I just don't remember, but I always try to be as honest as possible. I do remember though when my room is blue, and I guess I'm 13, 14, 15, those kinds of years, the raping started happening again. My father had bought me this book when I was, yeah, around that age somewhere, and it was called Help Lord, the Devil Wants Me Fat. I was about 186 pounds. I remember because I went to Weight Watchers and got on the scale, and that's how much I weighed. And he brought this book home to me. Help, Lord, the Devil Wants Me Fat. So in this book, you had to fast for 10 days, and it would break the spell that Satan had on you over food. Now, I grew up and learned that trauma victims have all kinds of things that we use to get through life, food being one of them. And I was obviously a victim to food. During those years, I can remember, actually, I can remember when I was like 8, very early, maybe even younger than that, my parents used to throw huge parties and we would sneak downstairs and eat before all the guests arrived because there was a lot of food out. And I can remember eating so much to the point where I'd go upstairs and throw up. Um, and to just share about addiction here, if you're listening to this and you have lived through these childhood tragedies like I did, I want you to know that addiction is a way to get through the pain. I want you to find peace and love. I want you to know that God loves you, that Jesus finds you in those places. I have never had Jesus be cruel to me. I've had many addictions. I have. I mean, I drank too much. I smoked, um, all those things, sleeping around, that kind of thing. I mean, I did, I didn't, all of that stuff. I don't condemn myself around that stuff, but those addictions started early in life, until I started drinking at 16, which I really liked. But anyway, let's go back to the story. Um, so he buys me this book when I'm 13 to 15, whatever. I think I'm, yeah, around those years. And I end up losing weight. I just quit eating because everything my father told me to do, I did. I can remember when we were in the big house, and I guess I was about 5. We were sitting at the dinner table, and my dad looked over at me and said, "You're eating with your right hand." I looked at him, and he said, "No baby girl of mine would eat with her right hand." So I put my fork down and picked up my fork with my left hand. Um, And from that day forward, I was left-handed. So anytime my father told me to do anything, that's what I did. So when he gave me this book, I just quit eating. And I lost 60 pounds. So I went from a size 18 to a junior size 9. And I looked good. But what I realized was my father didn't want to rape a fat girl. And so after I had lost all that weight, I find my father coming into my room when I'm 15 and making out with me like I'm some kind of mistress or whatever. And I can remember fighting him to the point where his teeth clicked with my teeth. And anyway, he just ended up raping me and going back to his room. So, sometime later, I don't know how much longer, but it wasn't too much longer. My mother obviously knew and did not like it. I share these stories here because honestly, it's just those, I could have been raped all those years. I just honestly don't remember. I do remember my brother coming in still when my room was blue. So those years, 13, 14, something like that, and him raping me as well. He came to me in life and told me that we did a lot of things together. I think my mind just honestly just checked out from like probably 5 until 13 or 14 again when I'm now losing weight and have hope that I might find a boy that wants me. And then he rapes me again. And so I remember that because it was, and I also remember my brother's rape. It was really painful again too. So just telling it as honestly as I can. Anyway, so some weeks after my father had been in my room, I find myself being called now into my parents' room. They had this poster bed, and my mom is naked on the bed. I remember being a small child and having to do things with my mother. You can read the detail in my book. It is the least favorite part of my story, so I don't really like to share it, but she was definitely part of the mayhem and is a pedophile. And um, all through my childhood, I had to watch her take baths, which later I learned she did with other children in the family. 2 generations of children actually confirmed to me that my mom also made them watch her bathe. So anyway, kind of coming back to the story, I'm being called into their room, and my mom is there in position for me to do something, but now my father is in position to sodomize me because, of course, you won't get pregnant. And I must have heard him talk about it or something because, um, well, I just know that's why he was doing it that way. But the act was so incredibly vile that the smell of my mother, with me having to do that part while my father is raping me anally, it's so bad that I actually have to run out of their bathroom and throw up violently. There was a bathroom outside of their room, and I'm in there just throwing up, and I'm in a lot of physical pain from my father. But my father makes me come back. And so I do go back in my room and in their room, and my father finishes. I don't have to do anything else after that except let my father finish. After that, I do believe that was the very last time at 15 or 16. I can't really remember the age exactly, but I think I was driving then. So I think I might have been 16. I actually ran away that time. I had had it. I couldn't take anymore. And I had a friend, and I ran away and went to her house for a few days. which was very unlike me, but I think I just had my fill. Losing that weight had really made me hope that I could find somebody that might love me, and them doing that to me again really, I think, kind of broke the last little bit of hope or peace in me. I couldn't tolerate anymore. So I left and went to my friend's house. And I tell you, it was so fun. We were in her room. I can remember playing records like Pat Benatar, because the year was probably 1980 or 81, and we had albums galore. I can still see the album covers. We'd smoke cigarettes with the window open, and you know what? It was just so much fun. I loved being there. She lived with just her mom. Her mom was divorced, and I had never, ever experienced that kind of fun. We were friends in high school, so she had a car and a lot of freedom. And I just think, again, that was God's way of helping me have a place to run to that I could survive for a moment. But after about 4 or 5 days of sheer wonderful freedom, I looked out Andy's window and saw my father sitting down the street in his car, just sitting there looking up. And these abusers always have a way, like it feels like they're God, right? Like they always know what's happening in your life. That certainly was how my father was for me. That reminds me of a time where he smoked, and so I smoked. I mean, when I was 8 years old, I can remember running up and grabbing his beer right off the table and drinking it. He let me break those rules, but then when I was a teenager, I couldn't smoke, and I must have stolen cigarettes from him or got them from somewhere. I honestly can't remember now. I do remember that cigarettes were 38 cents a pack. That was really something back then. So I could have bought them because, I was probably old enough, although I think you had to be 18. I can't remember. Anyway, I had cigarettes. I bet I didn't steal my dad's only because I would have been in so much trouble because I suppose I should add that to the story too. If you did anything wrong, he took you upstairs, made you take your pants down, and beat you very hard with a leather belt that had metal rivets in it. So I'm pretty sure I didn't steal his cigarettes. But this day I had ran up to get the bus, and a cigarette fell. I'm telling this story just to tell you that my dad ends up at school. I get in trouble. I have to smoke all these cigarettes in front of him. So it was like no matter what you did in that house, he always had some weird sixth sense and knew what you were doing. He was like the master of all control. So I just remember him sitting down the street and looking up at the window, like, how do you know that that was even, we were up there having fun. And my heart sank. And I told Andy I have to leave. And I did leave. I went back to him, obviously. I had to. I'm pretty sure I was 16. Um, and then sometime later, I met what would become my first husband. I've been married 4 times. Again, I am not going to feel any condemnation about that. That I tell you, well, I'll talk about it in just a minute here. So I go home, but now I can drive, and so I tell you, I cannot wait to find the first person that can help me get the out of my parents' house because I needed away from these monsters in a huge way. And I went out and found this guy that was he was like a rebel without a cause. And I thought, oh, dude, I didn't even care. I didn't love him. I didn't even care, but I needed help to get away from my parents. So I graduated when I was 17 in June. And I met him. I can't remember now. Anyway, we married in November of 1982, so I'd only been out of school a few months. I know we only knew each other 7 months, but I didn't care because I felt like he brought me home one time. He came to school and got me, and he had this weird way of knowing things too, because like he showed up and there he was. So he almost felt like my dad in some ways. He was a very controlling guy, even back then when I was 17. And anyway, I left from school and we went and got burgers and sat down by the river. We didn't do anything wrong, but when he brought me home, I was probably 2 hours late, and my father was furious and ran out and attacked him, basically, and told me to get in the house, that kind of thing. Well, this guy that I was dating, went down to the store and called me and said, "Man, are you okay?" And that was the first time anybody had ever even tried to intervene in my life after all of that stuff that I just shared. So I married him at 18 against my father's wishes, of course, because I'm sure my dad wished I would have married him because he was a sick uck. Um, let's see. So I get married. This guy is horribly controlling and abusive, and I stay home while he runs around and cheats for the first 3 years of our marriage, and then I have my first child. He's still abusive and runs around. I have my second child, but having my children is amazing. Um, and I just decide I'm going to focus on them, and I don't really care. I'm so used to and accustomed to abuse that I don't even think about leaving him because I was never taught that. I was always just taught to be compliant, and I was super good at it. So I stay with him for the next 17 years, and I have scars on my body from that relationship. My children were horribly abused in it. He was verbally, sexually, and physically abusive with all of us. So I divorce him when I'm 35. And then my story really begins in the way of healing. So it's kind of interesting. I hope this is all followable to you listening. Usually we stop and have dialogue. But after that, I do get into counseling. I do live probably like I'm 17 because I'm free for the first time. I have nobody's control over me. I have a job where I'm not making a whole lot, but at least I can support me and my girls. But we're all out of control because I don't really know how to run a household because I have been controlled my whole life and my husband did. So, anyway, we made it, but it was a journey. My kids struggled a lot. I had now two other trauma survivors, and I have two unsuccessful marriages during the next ensuing 13 years. But I live alone for like 10 years. And then, well, in the beginning, I get married for like 2 months, and he was much younger, and that just wasn't going to work. I needed to focus on the girls to the best of my ability. And so I do stay single well, I date, but I don't live with anybody for 10 years. And then I get married again, and I find out that he is a full-blown meth addict. I'd never lived with that kind of an addict, so I decided not to stay when he told me he was never going to quit using meth. And then about 2 years later, I met my current husband, and we've been together for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years now, and it's absolutely what the best relationship I've ever been into. Um, so with all of that being said, I really, really want to say that if Jesus can do it for me, he can do it for you. I mean, that is a really quick story of 35 years of straight up abuse. And when I left that marriage at 35, I was a shell of a human being. If you ask my girls, they'll say that I was like a robot. And it's taken us, and we're still healing from all of those times because I'm not a robot anymore. And I do have my own voice, and I am successful as a person. And I really am honored to share my story. It was really cool that a listener asked that I share it. And I share it for the reason that I want to validate the person listening and tell you, wherever you find yourself, I know what it feels like. I know what it feels like to be trapped. If you're still with your parents, I know what that feels like. I had no power. I had no worth. I had no hope. I had no control. I had nothing. And then I get married and I find myself for another 17 years in another brutal relationship. This guy was just an absolute brute. But there's something about me where I can like make candy in the middle of an absolute shitstorm and somehow survive it because, well, it's what I learned, right? My entire childhood just taught me survival. That's all I did. I just existed. And there was something about me, though, that I couldn't have my spirit broken. And I should probably tell this part of my story. It reminds me of why my counselor used to tell me. I went to him off and on for 15 years, and he used to say, Jody, you should not be who you are. And, I would think about that, and I knew in my heart why, because I met Jesus when I was really little. So let me tell you, um, in that little tiny house that I explained to you guys about that I moved out of when I was 4, it was after one of these brutal rapes because I could go through all the memories in that house, and there were lots of rapes in that house. I can remember my father broke his leg, and he came home and he raped me in his wheelchair, and it was incredibly painful because he put me on his lap, and his penetration was too deep for me, and it just hurt severely. There were just time after time after time, constantly in that house, it felt like. And I can remember one time walking down the hall and going into the first bedroom on the left and sitting up against the closet door, just sobbing and really sobbing most firstly because my body hurt so bad. And I remember feeling the presence of Jesus. And the weird thing is that I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything. I just knew he was there, but I didn't know his name. And I was very comforted in that moment. So that was, I turned 4 when we moved out of that house, so I had to be 3. Um, Going forward, when I was 8 years old, my dad quit drinking and became a fake Christian. And I mean a fake Christian, because he continued to rape me and have Bible study in the front, rape in the back. Um, but anyway, he took me to this church that they were going to, and you got to be so careful at churches, right? I mean, there are really good churches that I believe in and love, and there are churches that hide pedophilia. They are pedophiles. Be very careful. But I went to this church and I didn't like the people in the church, but they had this guy who was traveling through, and his name was Gene Lewin. I'll never forget him. I was 8 years old, and I listened to him, and he talked about the person of Jesus. And I remember thinking in my little heart, oh my God, that's the person I met in my room because I never knew who he was. And when he explained about Jesus, I knew that that was the name of the person. And I wrote him a letter. And later, my mom told me that they published that letter in, not Guideposts, but there was some Christian magazine now. I can't remember what it was called. Anyway, he got that letter published because basically I told him I'd met Jesus and this is that guy. I tried to find that letter. I used to remember the name of that, but I can't remember the name of it now. Christianity Today, maybe. I don't even know. Anyway, um, the important part was what helped me become an overcomer was him. And you know what, you guys, it took a long time of stepping into faith and stepping away from the very first thing I did to start getting free was started to step away from abusive people. And one of the things that I see that's just so drastically wrong in families of incest, particularly, is that you stay with your family. You cannot stay with your family. And abusive men, you cannot stay by abusive men either. When I didn't heal. I could not heal when I stayed close to my family members. And unfortunately, I stayed with them way too long because I wanted a family. I needed a family, I thought. But the truth was is they just kept taking all the air out of me. They kept deflating me. They kept taking my worth. They kept belittling me. They kept controlling me. They kept taking my worth. I'm going to say that one 16 times because they are people who have no worth. So they can't give you any worth. Have I forgiven them? 100%. Because you know what? It's not worth it in life to carry them with me. And I believe that forgiveness actually separates you from the person who harmed you. So for me, it's actually quite easy to forgive because I don't want them in my dreams. I don't want them in my memories. And, it's a process to say it was easy to forgive. It's a process for sure. I remember, the days before my father died, my mom called and said he would be dying. And I went up to see him and we had a 6 hour conversation. And in that conversation, he asked me really weird things like, "What are you doing here?" And I told him I was not there for his love because he didn't have any love, but I was there because I knew the man that he was, and that God too knew the man that he was a raping murderer. And I told him that I was very concerned for his soul. And my father looked at me and probably said the most profound thing I've ever heard my father say. He sat back and he said, "You wait a lifetime for a love like that." Now, whether that helped my father make a different decision before he died, it's none of my business. I don't know where he went when he crossed over. That's between him and God. It's none of my business. But that is what he said. And he did apologize for the murder because I told him that I'd had guilt from walking out of that room alive when she did not. And he said, "I'm sorry." And he sat back and he said it again, "I'm so sorry." Now, my mother's still alive. And I'm going to tell you, if you're listening to this and you're sitting by people who are alive, and when it's incest, particularly, if they don't tell you exactly what they did, you cannot stay by them. Families of incest are built on deception. Do you know why I'm an overcomer? Because I looked at the deception and I said, "Get behind me. I ain't listening to you anymore. I'm not the liar. You are. I'm not the coward. You are. I'm not the abuser. You are." And I got on down the road. And I'll tell you, it took me too long to get down the road away from them to safety. God does not want you staying there by them. It is not safe. Please hear me. If you're in a church that tells you to forgive and stay by your abuser, I have a hard time with that, especially if you have children. This is what's making our children perpetuating these cycles and having our children be hurt. Don't let your children be around abusers. If you have to, send them a card and tell them you love them. Talk to them on the phone, but do not let them around your children. Because here's the problem. You can love the person and hate the sin, but it's sin and you got to call that sin out and you've got to keep yourself and your family members free from that. It is an entangled web that Satan wants to keep you in. And I tell you, don't do it. Get down the road. So at this point of the interviews, I always ask the person that I'm interviewing, what would they like to leave with the listener? And I guess for me, um, what I want to leave with you is a message that I know an angel delivered to me because I am a defender of his people. And I know that I walk in divine guidance to help you. And do you know what the message was? You see you. Think about that for a minute. It changed my entire life. When I got married to my husband now that I'm married to, that I'm deeply in love with, and we have a wonderful marriage, I think I would have ended up in another divorce because I couldn't see myself. The only thing that I could see ever was my abuser, the person who was going to hurt me, the person that I couldn't trust. And when I met that angel, he wrote down, he asked me, "Do you have a piece of paper and a pen?" I didn't. But in my purse, I had an envelope and an eyebrow pencil. And he wrote down, "You see you." And it changed me because all of a sudden I wasn't looking at anybody but myself. And you know what I found in the mirror was somebody I loved, somebody I could respect, somebody I honored. somebody that God loved and wanted to talk to. And I was so terrified to look at myself that all I ever did was look at everybody else. Getting certified in prophetic heart healing has been a beautiful thing. And the founder of the company says this very bold statement. She says, one of the bravest things you'll ever do in life is look at your own heart. And I'm going to agree with her because what that angel was telling me in you, see you, was Jody, you got to look at your own heart. And you know what? That was when healing started. Because my counselor, while I loved him greatly, he helped me tremendously in what my mind was doing, knowing that I was having a flashback and that it wasn't like her spirit coming at me because I would see this woman walk towards me through the years and it scared the shit out of me. And I'd go to him and he'd explain to me that that was a flashback. Or, smells would come to me and trigger me. I mean, I was just lighting up like a Christmas tree with all these triggers and memories. And, 35 years of abuse is a long time. You got a lot of stuff in you to be triggered through. Um, but I'll tell you, when you let God step in and reconvene in your heart, everything changes. He takes down those great big places of fear, rejection, self-loathing. He gives you the ability to see yourself. And quite honestly, you know what I'm going to leave with you? I bet you're going to like who you find. I really like who I am. It's fun to explore myself. I actually can tell people now I can stand up for myself and say I'm not going to be treated like that. It's quite remarkable. So, in the coming days, you've just heard my testimony, and it's a hard story. And I tell you, there's valleys and hills that, I'll share in podcasts. I share as I'm led to. I'm an open book. I'm an open book so that you can be an open book. Don't shy back from your story. You were a victim. It breaks my heart that we're scared to tell our stories because of shame. Oh my gosh, you were a prisoner. You were imprisoned in these houses that you couldn't get out of. Don't feel ashamed for telling your story. Tell it boldly if you can, but tell it. Even if you have to whisper it to your cat at first, tell it. If you can find a good friend, tell it. Send me an email. My email's all over. Tell me your story. You don't have to come on the podcast, but I'm here to help. Tell your story. So I'm going to leave you with all love and you see you. I'll see you next time. If you appreciate the work that we're doing, would you please subscribe because that's how it works out here. I'd appreciate it.